Is there a realistic path for Bitcoin to adopt post-quantum security? One of the more serious attempts at preparing Bitcoin for a post-quantum world is BIP 360, authored by Hunter Beast, which is proposing a framework for introducing a new DSA called Pay-to-Quantum Resistant Hash into Bitcoin's transaction model. It's a good approach, honestly, and one of the more technically coherent models within the ecosystem. But like every quantum migration proposal so far, it sidesteps probably the most difficult part of the migration. When and how do you deprecate the old signature scheme without stranding users who have never moved their coins? This is the part most blockchains avoid because it's not just a cryptographic problem, it's also a governance and a social consensus problem. You could also argue that it's an ideology problem, in that coins would be left essentially stranded. Implementing a new signature scheme is relatively easy on paper. The real difficulty is the global migration that follows. Every wallet, client, node implementation, hardware signer, exchange, and cold storage system must be upgraded. And then millions of users will have to make an active transaction in order to move their funds to a quantum safe output. So during this migration period, you would have some transactions that are post-quantum secure and some would not, which brings an interesting question if different Bitcoins are secured by different types of cryptography. Factually, we know that a large fraction of Bitcoin, typically estimated between 16 and 20%, is already vulnerable because those coins sit in outputs where the public key has already been revealed. Multi-sig, legacy, pay-to-public key, reused addresses, real old coins, so on. Those coins can mathematically be recovered by a cryptographically relevant quantum computer running Shor's algorithm against SCCP 256K1, which is the elliptical curve standard that Bitcoin uses in its DSA for asymmetric cryptography. That estimate comes from different analyses by Deloitte, multiple independent researchers, and others. We also know that every Bitcoin spend reveals the public key, which means that the security of an active wallet collapses the moment a cryptographically relevant quantum computer exists. An adversary would only need a short window, conceptually minutes, to compute the private key, rewrite the transaction, and then front-run it into the mempool. This is not a theoretical risk. It's a direct consequence of how ECDSA works. And that's not even counting rogue node theory, which I'll cover in another episode, in which a quantum computer could have much longer in order to try and reverse engineer a transaction. And here's the part that rarely gets acknowledged. A migration cannot be automated. Bitcoin has no abstraction and no way to update the dormant coins. Migration requires manual action. The user must sign a transaction with their existing private key and move their coins to a post-quantum secure address by themselves. Some users will never do this. Some users are lost, some passphrases are forgotten, some institutions will delay until it's too late, which raises the unanswered, politically difficult question: what happens to the unmigrated coins when the quantum clock runs out? And this gets back into the ideology problem. At the end of the day, migrating to post-quantum security creates winners and losers, in that eventually the DSA will have to be deprecated, and if you haven't migrated, then you're ending up on the losing side. So what happens to the unmigrated coins when the quantum clock finally runs out? That's the real bottleneck in Bitcoin's path to post-quantum security. Not the math, really, not the code, even though the migration itself would be incredibly difficult, unprecedented in fact. And so far, no Bitcoin improvement proposal has been able to solve this. This is why we built the quantum-resistant ledger, post-quantum secure since the first block in 2018, using government-grade NIST security. To learn more, come to www.theqrl.org or jump into our Discord group, and people will be happy to answer your questions. Until then, keep those digital assets secure.